Welcome to today's Back to Basics webinar. Today is April 12th, Easter. Follow the link below this video to download and print the handout to follow along throughout this presentation. While you're printing the handout, let me introduce Back to Basics Tax Seminars, also known as BTB. My partner James Hockenberry and I, Tom Zoller, are the current owners of BTB, and we do live seminars in Arizona and Wisconsin. 11 a year in Arizona, 31 a year in Wisconsin. BTB was founded in 1979, over 40 years ago, by Michael and Celia Barnes, who are currently retired in Arizona. Prior to purchasing BTB, Jim and I lectured for Michael for several years. We purchased the business in 2006. We collectively have over 50 years lecturing experience. Jim has over 30 years in income tax, and financial related matters. Jim also served as a tax research analyst at a major tax research firm. You know, the place the tax professionals go when they can't find the answers. Jim received his enrolled agent designation in 1993. Enrolled agents are the only federally licensed tax practitioners who specialize in taxation. The enrolled agent profession began way back in 1884. Currently, that consists of a two-day exam on nothing but tax law. Jim also holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Wisconsin. I have over 35 years experience in income tax, small business consulting, tax planning, and individual financial planning. I obtained my enrolled agent designation in 1986. I received my certified financial planner designation in 1988. I received my master's degree in taxation in 1995 and finished my PhD in tax law in 2010. Although this material is copywritten, feel free to rewrite the text and forward it to your small business owners as you feel applicable. We strongly suggest you retain and or add to any disclaimers if you decide to use this information in that format. To update our first seminar, by the way, if you want to watch the first seminar, if you take a look at the top of the screen, it's not in the handout. You can watch our previous webinar by going to btbtaxlink.com and click on COVID-19 tax update. Again, that's btbtaxlink.com and click on the COVID-19 tax update. That'll bring you to and you can watch the previous seminar. But since that seminar was put out, IRS came out with Notice 2020-23, where they extended tax deadlines for filing requirements and payment obligations that affect individual estates and corporations and others. That includes various tax form filing and payment obligations. Returns that are due between April 1st, 2020 and July 15, 2020 have been extended to July 15, 2020, including the June 15th estimated tax payments and deadlines for claims for refunds on the 2016 returns. It also suspends associated interest, additions of tax, and penalties for late filing or late payment until July 15th. As a note, if you have lenders that you're working with for your clients are working with for the PPP loan, they'll request a variety of different information for the PPP loan application. It's their job to serve as an intermediary between the business owner and the SBA and ensure proper documentation is obtained and retained by the lending facility in preparation and of the SBA application. The SBA application itself is only a two-page form. It's also been realized that if your business owner requests proceeds for health insurance and or employer provided contributions towards retirement funds, the process may take longer and additional documentation will be required. Now, the banks are backed up on the loan processing. So if your client is having difficulty obtaining help from the bank, tell them they might want to consider going to Kabbage.com. Kabbage serves as an intermediary of a federal depository in the loan process. As a disclaimer, we will continue to provide information as it becomes available and we have time to review it. Information is changing as fast as it's coming. Information contained within this webinar is considered to have been from reliable sources. Information contained within this webinar is also presented in a summary format only. Employer provided sick leave. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. This is the first time in our history that our government has required sick pay for the small business owners. At current, it applies only for sick pay under certain conditions as listed below and effective April 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2020. Some other countries have sick pay for all employees that may even include up to 2 years off sick pay for post childbirth. Again, this is a base overview. Things seem to change daily. The employer provided sick pay is if the employee is unable to work due to certain COVID-19 related items. As a generalization, we're going to look at this from either self care, which there seems to be three potential times that an employee will be eligible for this, or that's where they're taking care of themselves. The other options could be other care. Here, they're taking care of another. There are generally two options that'll be applicable there. As we go through this, also keep in mind the self employed and S corporations are eligible for this benefit. There are special rules related to both. Although the concept is the same, we have not included this in the overview. For specific details with the 28-page report, predominantly frequently asked questions, in the footnote of the handout, we give you the website to Google for irs.gov, COVID-19, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Go to that on the bottom of the footnote, okay, in the handout that we've given you. That I would suggest you print out regardless of anything. Now, when we take a look, still on page one, of the first of three times self-care may be applicable. That's where an employee individually is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19. Then, still on page one, we're talking about the second instance where somebody may be eligible for self-care sick pay. That's where an employee has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to concerns related to COVID-19. And then finally, the third self care provision. That's where an employee experienced symptoms of COVID-19 and desires to self quarantine. It means they made the decision themselves. There's a potential employee abuse on that, which we'll talk about later on. Now, when we talk about other care, there are generally two provisions that would be applicable. And again, that's where I need sick time off so I can care for another. In other care, option number four, that's where an employee is caring for an individual that is subject to either one or two of the self care options identified above. In the case of other care, number five, that's where an employee who is caring for their children or child if the school or place of child for the child or children is closed or the child care provider is unavailable due to COVID-19 precautions and there are no other sources of child care for the employee. As a note, this is not a function of the accounting or tax service that we provide to our small business owners. However, our small business owners are required to be aware of these rules. So if I had one business owner call me and their employees seemed to know more and their interpretation of what the eligibility was considerably different than what the rules dictate. So our small business owners have to be aware of this. I've got construction builders, so on and so forth, that are really good at what they do, but this is something that they're not apprised of. So I feel as a consultant to small business owners, we need to get this out. If your client does pay their employees sick pay, we have to know the rules and the record keeping requirements so that they qualify and they do receive payroll tax credit as we're going to outline below. Before we get about the credit, let's talk about some examples when maybe the COVID-19 employees, when it's not going to be applicable. So let's just talk about a couple. Example one, we've got a beauty salon that is closed because the state ordered it. I think that's almost every state now. I know it is in Wisconsin, Arizona. Well, generally, the employees are not eligible for sick pay, but the employees are eligible for unemployment. Now, in example two, restaurants, and again, I know those are all closed in Wisconsin and Arizona, but the restaurant may stay open for carryout. Here, the employees are not, the employees that they retain are going to be paid employees and continue to get paid. The employees the restaurant did not retain, they're they're generally not eligible for sick pay, but they are eligible for unemployment. Now, with both of those being said, your employees in either one of those examples may still be eligible for sick pay. Let's say employees in examples one or two above, the restaurant and the beauty salon. Okay, if they meet one of the above requirements for eligibility of sick pay, they're generally entitled to it. However, on the other hand, remember, if they meet one of the requirements for sick pay, then they're generally not eligible or available for work. Being eligible and available for work is one of the requirements to qualify for unemployment. So if you run into any employees that fall in that category, it's my suggestion. I know in Wisconsin they got a great coverage of frequently asked questions under the state unemployment website. So go to the state unemployment website, look at the specifics on it. Also, Google, as I mentioned a couple times already, what's in the footnote of this handout. Go to the irs.gov COVID-19 and print that 28 pages out and take a look at that, see what's applicable. Now, when we talk about self-care, okay, fine, we talked about three examples when they're entitled to it. Okay, but what exactly are they entitled to? Well, they're entitled to 100% of their regular pay, but not to exceed $511 a day. How long are they entitled to that? Well, for a maximum of 10 sick days. That could be a maximum employee benefit or dollars in the amount of $5,110. Now, that's for all three of the self-care. In the case of the other care, depends upon when the other care is applicable. In the case of other care, where the employee is requesting sick pay because they're taking care of somebody in category one or two, they're entitled for 2/3 of their regular pay, not to exceed $200 a day. For how long? A maximum of 10 periods. Now that would match the self-care employee. How long? How much is the maximum benefit to the employee? It could be as much as $2,000. Now, remember there is two other pay categories. The second other pay category is when they're taking care of their own children. The daycare is closed. There, they're still entitled to 2/3 of the regular pay, not to exceed $200 a day. But now instead of a maximum of 10 days, it is a maximum of 60 days. Here, the employee benefit could be as much as $12,000. Okay, the employer, what are they entitled to? Assuming they do the proper documentation, they're eligible for a payroll tax credit. Well, what does that cover exactly? Well, it covers whatever I have to pay the employee. It also covers the employer's portion of the health insurance for the number of sick days that I'm paying the employee. It also requires the employer's portion of the FICA and Medicare for that same payroll. Okay, fine. That's what I'm entitled to. Now, how do I get paid? Well, every quarter we fill out a 941 to send money in for payroll taxes. The 941 for the second quarter is going to be changed. There's going to be a place there that you subtract the amount due. And when you do that subtraction, that's how you get paid back. Simple, if everything works right. Well, what happens if the amount of my credit is larger than the amount of my payroll tax liability on the 941? Not a problem. Take your credit on the 941, and then you'll be filling out an additional form, Form 7200, to get the additional amount of the credit. So when all said and done, this is going to be an after payroll tax credit. After that's done, this would be a no employer cost employee benefit. That doesn't mean it's going to all work smooth. I've had some employers called concerned already because even though this benefit doesn't cost them anything, they're short staffed. And even though it won't cost them anything out of their pocket, they don't have enough employees to maintain their operations. All right, on page 3, what information is the employer required to retain or receive to be eligible for this payroll tax credit? Well, they're required for the employee's name, the date or dates in which the employee leave is requested, a statement of the COVID-19 related person and the employee is requesting leave, and written support for for any reason. A statement that the employee is unable to work, including means by telework. These records should be maintained for a period of 4 years from when the employee is paid for the sick pay and available for IRS request. Now, still on page 3, but I'm going to talk about what's coming up on page 4. As note 1, as a small business owner, they're concerned about potential employee abuse. We tried to address that on page 4, which I'll talk about when I get there. We're also required as an employer to substantiate sufficiently for the payroll tax credit. That's why we designed page 4. Again, you're more than welcome to pass page 4 on to your business clients for implementation with their sick pay compliance. That's why we designed the form. Still on page 3, on note 2, this is by no means a complete analysis of the sick pay requirements, but it should provide sufficient information for most of your small business owners. It should also provide more than enough sufficient paperwork to ensure your small business owner complies with the record keeping requirements to obtain and be eligible for the payroll tax credit. And hopefully, the way the request for sick pay is laid out should assist avoiding potential employee abuse for our small business owners. Now, turning to page 4, let's take a look at the employee sick pay request form. Some of the basic information appears at the top of the form and some at the bottom of the form. Top of the form, we're going to ask for the business name itself, the date the employee made the request for sick pay, and what's the employee's name. Now, in the bottom of the form, the employee is requesting what specific dates do they want off and to get paid for sick pay. Also, the employee's signature attesting that the reasons they cited on the request for sick pay. And still on page 4, during the body of it, let's look at that. Again, there are 3 self-care provisions an employee can ask for self-pay. So let's cover those first. This specifically identifies to the employee if they meet category 1, the employee individually is subject to federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19. If that's the case, I need you to attach the government entity ordering, tell me the name of the government entity ordering the quarantine, and attach a copy of the government entity that ordered the quarantine, whatever you have in writing. Now, if they're asking for sick pay under self-care option number 2, here the employee has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to concerns related to COVID-19 and requires both. All right, you tell me that a healthcare provider told you to. Who told you that? And attach a statement from the healthcare provider. That's no different than a lot of firms require a doctor's statement or a doctor's notice when they're taking time off of work. This is going to fall in that same range. And then finally, if they're asking for sick pay due to category number 3, self-care, the employee believes they're making the determination that they're experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and decides to self-quarantine. Now, I need 2 things. 1, I want you to turn in with this request a description of the symptoms you're experiencing. 2, I want you to give me some doctor information. If you think, you're experiencing COVID-19 symptoms, you're definitely going to make a doctor's appointment. And again, that's no different than a lot of firms require a statement from the doctor that you're not in shape to work. So when do you have the appointment with that doctor and who is the doctor? Now, still on page 4, we're looking at one of the other options. This is where I'm caring for somebody else. So if the employee is caring for an individual who's subject to self-care number 1 or self-care number 2 above, now we require the name of the person you're caring for and the relationship of that person. Then we also want the same information or the same verification that the person that meets category 1 or 2 self-care would be required if they were requesting sick pay. And then finally, if you're applying for sick pay under other care number 5, What do we need? Who qualifies for it? Well, if the employer is caring for their child, if the school or place for child for the child is closed or the child care provider is unavailable due to COVID-19 precautions. Information is required: name of the child, children, the age of the child or children, the name of the daycare with something attached to this request, verifying that the daycare is closed or no longer available. All right. Is there another that can care for your child? We're going to ask that question. Do you have a grandmother? Do you have a spouse, a girlfriend, boyfriend that stays at home that can care for the child so you can go to work? And then finally, if the child is older than 14, why do you need to stay at home with the child? The child should be able to take care of themselves. There could be special circumstances. The child could be of special needs. Tell us why. Now, you might also run into a situation, unfortunately, because this is based on facts and circumstances, and the law is not any clearer than what we're talking about that I'm aware of. You could have a parent that simply says, "Have you ever met my 16-year-old? I would not leave that kid home alone." Okay. So you're going to have to deal with it based on facts and circumstances. Now, I hope this has answered most of your questions regarding sick pay. And we look forward to, we'll provide these information webinars as the information becomes available. Thank you, and I hope you all had a good Easter.